Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something that has fascinated both historians and conspiracy theorists alike, the Mayan calendar. Imagine this. You're standing in the heart of an ancient civilization, the air thick with the scent of incense and smoke, as priests in elaborate headdresses and brightly colored robes trace the movements of stars and planets with intense focus. They aren't just tracking the sky for the fun of it. Oh no. They're looking for something much bigger, something profound. The Mayans, those incredibly skilled astronomers, carved a calendar system into stone that stretched over thousands of years, all tied to cycles of time, the heavens, and perhaps even the end of the world. You probably won't survive this deep dive into ancient Mayan prophecy without a few raised eyebrows along the way. It's wild, it's mysterious, and yes, the Mayans really thought they could predict the future through the stars. They weren't just counting days, they were weaving a grand cosmic narrative that spanned across centuries. Their calendar wasn't like our simple 12-month system. It was layered with different cycles, movements, and astronomical markers, each with its own meaning. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is, because just like the Mayans, I'm fascinated by the passage of time. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Mayan calendar is probably best known for one big thing, the end of time. You've heard about it, right? How it was said to predict the end of the world in 2012. But the truth is, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The calendar itself was based on the sacred cycles of the heavens, not some esoteric doom and gloom prophecy. It's true that, for the Mayans, time was not linear. It wasn't something that just moved forward, like the seconds ticking on a modern clock. No, their view of time was cyclical. Time for them was more like a great wheel turning, with each cycle bringing something new, something sacred, and perhaps, at times, a little terrifying. Historians still argue over whether the Mayans saw these cycles as signs of apocalyptic endings or simply as inevitable resets. Some think that it was just the natural flow of time, an ending of one age, but a rebirth of another. But one thing's for sure, the Mayan calendar wasn't just a tool for measuring time, it was a key to understanding their entire worldview. You feel a soft breeze rustling through the ancient trees, their leaves whispering as you walk through the dense jungle, the stones beneath your feet cool and weathered. Around you, Mayan priests are hard at work, eyes tracing the stars as their hands move in intricate patterns, mapping the heavens with an unshakable precision. This isn't some idle stargazing. These priests are the intellectual elite of their society, able to interpret celestial events with remarkable accuracy. They've spent years, decades, studying the stars and planets, measuring their movements and understanding their influence on life here on Earth. For them, the stars were more than just distant lights in the sky. They were living, breathing entities, intimately connected with the cycles of nature and human existence. Historians still debate how the Mayans were able to master the complex art of astronomy. Some believe they developed a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos by watching the stars over centuries, while others argue that their calendar systems were inspired by divine insight. Either way, what's clear is that the Mayans saw the stars not just as a means of telling time, but as a divine map that guided their civilization's every move. From the movements of Venus, which was associated with the gods of war and creation, to the alignment of certain constellations with the agricultural cycles, the Mayans had an uncanny ability to predict everything from the arrival of rain to the timing of their most important rituals. The priests, armed with their stone tools and meticulously carved codices, could predict celestial events with terrifying accuracy. Eclipses, the rising and setting of the planets, and the shifting patterns of the constellations were all part of their cosmic calendar. And while their methods may seem primitive by today's standards, the truth is they had access to an extraordinary level of knowledge. Some even argue that their understanding of the heavens might have been far ahead of its time. The star maps they created were used not just for timing the planting of crops, but for marking significant events in the Mayan cycle of life: weddings, deaths, and even battles. It wasn't just about understanding the heavens, it was about interpreting the will of the gods. The Mayan priests believed that by aligning their actions with the cosmic calendar, they could harness the power of the stars and the gods and ensure the prosperity of their civilization. As you stand here, surrounded by the sacred ruins, you realize that the very cycles they tracked, these celestial rhythms, were deeply embedded in every aspect of Mayan life. Time wasn't just a measure of passing seconds. It was an active, living force, tied to both the physical world and the divine. And in this delicate balance, the Mayans sought to find meaning. The jungle night deepens around you, and you can almost feel the weight of the stars above pressing down on the earth. The priests, with their torches flickering in the darkness, continue their work. And suddenly you catch whispers of something that sounds eerily familiar, a prophecy about the end of an age. The famous Mayan long count calendar didn't just keep track of months or years, it tracked entire epochs or world ages. And according to this cosmic clock, one of those epochs was destined to end on a specific date, December 21st, 2012. Cue the dramatic music. You remember the frenzy, right? The movies, the talk shows, the endless online debates about whether the world was going to end. The idea of a looming apocalypse captured the modern imagination like nothing else. People stocked up on supplies, built bunkers, and made dramatic farewell posts on social media. And while it's easy to laugh now, considering we're all still here, there was something undeniably chilling about the idea that an ancient stone calendar could pinpoint the end of everything. Historians still argue whether the Mayans ever intended this date to mark the literal end of the world, or if it was simply the conclusion of one great cycle, resetting the cosmic odometer back to zero. Some scholars suggest it was more like the New Year's Eve of the ancient world, a time of renewal, not destruction. Still, the myth had teeth. There were rumors about solar flares, rogue planets colliding with Earth, and sudden polar shifts. Fringe theorists claimed the Mayans possessed secret knowledge of cataclysmic cycles that modern science had overlooked. And honestly, can you blame people for being a little freaked out? The Mayans' track record for predicting eclipses and planetary alignments was so good that when their calendar said something big was coming, people paid attention, perhaps too much attention. As you stand in the dark, you imagine what it must have felt like to be a Mayan priest at the close of a cycle, preparing the people for a world reborn or a world about to end. The stone calendar, carved with exquisite detail, wasn't just a tool. It was a statement that time itself could be known, tracked, and even anticipated. And on that infamous date in 2012, people all around the world looked up at the sky with a mix of fear and wonder, waiting for something, anything to happen. But when the sun set and rose again, life went on, as it always does. Maybe the prophecy wasn't wrong at all. Maybe it just wasn't about destruction. Maybe, as the Mayans might have said, the world didn't end. It simply turned the page. As the calendar's end date passes and life continues, the question remains, what does it mean to truly understand time? You stand under the vast night sky, the stars now cold and distant, and the meaning behind the Mayans' grand timekeeping begins to unfold. To the Mayans, time wasn't something to be feared. It was cyclical, eternal, and inextricably linked to their gods, their seasons, and their very lives. In their eyes, each cycle that ended wasn't a tragic finale. It was a new beginning. The world didn't come to a screeching halt. It reset, refreshed, as if time itself was a wheel turning, grinding forward, always in motion. Historians still argue whether the Mayans saw the passage of time in this way, or whether they believed their world would experience a literal end. Some scholars suggest that the Mayans viewed the end of the cycle as a cosmic rebirth, where the forces of creation and destruction were balanced. In their worldview, destruction wasn't an ominous event. It was a necessary part of creation. The death of one age gave rise to another, And this endless cycle was not something to fear, but to embrace. To them, the calendar was a reminder that time didn't just move forward, it wove through a spiral, creating space for new growth and new opportunities with every turn. The end of the world wasn't the apocalypse, it was the next chapter in a never-ending story. But beyond the priests and their understanding of celestial mechanics, there's something even more fascinating at play here. The very structure of the Mayan calendar, how it was divided into different cycles, each nested within the other, reflects the Mayan understanding of both macro and micro scales. Each cycle represented a different unit of time, from the short term to the long term. But what's more, these cycles didn't just track time, they helped regulate the rhythms of life itself. The harvests, the rains, the sacrifices, the festivals, they all occurred in harmony with the movements of the stars and planets. It was as if the Mayans lived in perfect sync with the universe, and the stars above them weren't distant and indifferent, but part of a great cosmic orchestra that played the symphony of life. Time was not something abstract or theoretical. It was a living force, and the Mayans had perfected the art of listening to its music. It's easy to forget in our fast-paced modern world that ancient civilizations like the Mayans were attuned to these rhythms in ways that we're not. We rely on our digital clocks and calendars, our apps and alarms, but for the Mayans, the heavens themselves provided the most accurate timepieces. The days weren't simply something to be counted. They were sacred, a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. The Mayan priests were the gatekeepers of this sacred knowledge, interpreting celestial events with astounding precision, guiding their society through rituals, wars, and celebrations. And when the calendar reached its end, it wasn't just a record of years gone by. It was a reminder that their world, like the stars above, would always continue to turn. As you linger in the night, your mind begins to wander, contemplating how the Mayans viewed time compared to our modern understanding. They had no clocks ticking down seconds, no alarms to remind them of the passing hour. Instead, they relied on the natural world, the phases of the moon, the position of the stars, the flow of the seasons, to shape their lives. In this peaceful yet profound rhythm, the Mayans found meaning and purpose. Time wasn't just a countdown of days and years, but a living, breathing entity that connected the divine to the earthly. Their priests, with their stone tools and their knowledge of celestial mechanics, could predict not only the physical movements of the stars, but also the spiritual flow of their people's lives. Historians still debate whether the Mayans ever viewed the completion of a cycle as a harbinger of doom, or if it was simply a recognition of time's endless renewal. Some suggest that they believed each new age brought a shift in the balance of the universe, a transformation, not an end. The completion of one cycle gave way to the next, with no fear or hesitation. For the Mayans, there was no real end, just an eternal return to the beginning. Their world may have been different from ours, but their understanding of time as a cyclical force, intimately connected with their gods, is something we could learn a lot from today. Now let's talk about 2012 again. Remember the craziness, the endless debates, the predictions of the world coming to a halt? People weren't just talking about the Mayan calendar. They were obsessed with the idea that it was a warning, a countdown to some cosmic disaster. The truth is, the Mayans likely never saw it that way. They were marking the end of a cycle, yes, but not because they feared the apocalypse. They understood that every ending was followed by a new beginning, like the rising sun after the night. It was a natural part of their worldview, a chance for rebirth, for cleansing, for starting anew. The idea of the world ending, of time running out, wasn't part of the Mayan belief system. They didn't see time as a linear march toward death, but as a series of cycles that renewed themselves, each one ushering in new possibilities. They knew that what goes up must come down, and that what dies is reborn. Their calendar wasn't meant to scare or warn. It was meant to help them live in harmony with the universe, an endless dance between the earth and the stars. And perhaps that's where we've gone wrong. In our rush to measure time down to the millisecond, We've lost sight of the natural rhythms that once governed life. The Mayans lived with the cycles of nature, seeing them not as threats, but as opportunities to grow, evolve, and find balance. For them, the end of the world wasn't something that could be predicted, feared, or avoided. It was simply another chapter in the never-ending story of life, one that we are all a part of. As the night deepens, the air grows still around you, and you can almost hear the whispers of ancient priests, their voices blending with the winds as they look to the stars for guidance. In this quiet moment, you realize how profoundly different our relationship with time has become. In the modern world, time is something we measure, control, and obsess over, ticking away in our watches and calendars. But for the Mayans, time wasn't something to be feared. It wasn't a deadline. It was an endless cycle that offered a deeper connection to the divine and the natural world. Time wasn't an enemy. It was a companion, an essential force that provided structure to the universe, a force that gave meaning to life itself. The legacy of the Mayan calendar continues to resonate today, not because of any apocalyptic prediction, but because of its deeper, subtler lessons. It teaches us that time is not something we can bend to our will, but something we must learn to live with, understand, and respect. It reminds us that endings are not final. They are simply part of the eternal process of renewal and transformation. As the priests in their temples once pondered the cycles of time, so too can we pause and reflect on our place within the greater rhythm of life. Perhaps the greatest gift the Mayans left us is this timeless concept of cyclical time, a concept that offers a deeper, more harmonious way of seeing the world. The 2012 phenomenon, which caused such turmoil and fear, was merely a misunderstanding, a modern misinterpretation of an ancient belief. The Mayans didn't see 2012 as the end of the world. They saw it as the end of one age and the beginning of another, just as they had always seen time. The end was just the start of something new, a chance for growth, for change, for a fresh beginning. Now, as the last remnants of the star-filled night sky begin to fade and the first light of dawn begins to break, you realize that time, much like the stars, is a constant presence above us, watching over us. The Mayans understood that in the quiet spaces between the stars, there is an eternal rhythm, one that will continue long after our modern clocks have ticked away their final second. They understood that time is not something to fear, but something to be embraced, lived with, and respected. As you breathe in the cool morning air, you can't help but feel a sense of peace settle over you. The stories of the Mayans, their priests, and their celestial wisdom are no longer just ancient myths. They're a reminder of our place in the great dance of time, of our connection to the universe, and of the knowledge that even as the cycles change, we are never truly lost. The world continues to turn, the stars continue to shine, and with each passing day, the story of life continues to unfold. Tonight, we enter a dimly lit calligraphy room where flickering candles cast long shadows on the stone walls, and the soft rustle of goose feathers on parchment fills the air. The scent of wax and ink mingles with the faint scent of incense, and in the steady, soothing rhythm of the monk's work, you can almost feel time slowing down. Here, in this peaceful silence, an extraordinary task is taking place. The monks are calculating the end of the world. They have spent years, perhaps decades, poring over sacred texts, astronomical charts, and ancient scrolls, all in search of a single, terrifying date when the world will end. You probably won't survive this journey into the past without feeling a little uneasy. These monks, with their ancient wisdom and deep devotion, do more than calculate the hours of the day or the phases of the moon. No, they had their eyes set on something much greater. They believed that by studying the stars, scriptures, and the cycles of life, they could discover the secrets of the universe and, more importantly, when it would end. Imagine, with just the light of a candle, you could study the vastness of the universe. What did these monks know about time? And why did they believe the end of the world was so near? The world they inhabited was much different from ours. The ticking of clocks wasn't the constant companion we've come to rely on today. For medieval monks, the passing of time was something sacred, something to be observed and understood as a divine mystery. Their lives revolved around cycles, the lunar cycle, the liturgical cycle, the seasons, and most of all, the vast cosmic cycles that shape the world. Time wasn't measured by seconds or minutes. Instead, it was felt in the rhythm of their prayers, the turning of the seasons, and the celestial movements they so carefully tracked. But here's where it gets fascinating. These monks didn't just track the time that passed, they also tracked the time that would come. Historians still argue over whether the monks truly believed the end of the world was near, or whether they were simply following a long-standing tradition of apocalyptic predictions. Some say the monks were trying to calculate the exact moment when Christ would return to earth, an event they believed would mark the world's final chapter. Whatever their exact beliefs, there's no denying that they were obsessed with the end of time, and that obsession led them to write detailed prophecies and predictions, some of which still echo in our imaginations today. You stand there surrounded by stacks of ancient manuscripts, parchment yellowed with age and filled with intricate calculations. The monks, draped in their simple brown robes, seem almost part of the shadows themselves, their faces illuminated only by the soft candlelight. The scribes work quietly, their quills scratching the surfaces of thick parchment as they meticulously document the celestial movements they have studied for years. But it's not just the stars they're concerned with. They believe the very will of God is written in the stars, and through their observations, they hope to decipher His plan for the world. The Church, with its immense power over medieval life, was the ultimate authority on everything, including the measurement of time. Priests and monks weren't just responsible for tending to the spiritual needs of the community. They were also the keepers of the calendar, the timekeepers of society. And boy, did they take their job seriously. From the Gregorian calendar to the celestial charts they constructed, the Church meticulously controlled every aspect of time. Monasteries were the centers of timekeeping, and monks were often the only ones who had access to the tools and knowledge to interpret the stars. They believed that the timing of events like the second coming of Christ wasn't just a matter of faith, it was a matter of divine precision, to be calculated and predicted down to the exact moment. The monks' obsession with time didn't just stem from their religious duties, it was also deeply tied to their understanding of the universe. Historians still debate how the monks were able to craft such accurate calendars and predictions with the limited technology they had. Some believe they had access to astronomical knowledge passed down from ancient civilizations, like the Greeks and the Babylonians. Others argue that they simply had an acute understanding of the natural world, relying on detailed observations of the sun, moon, and stars. Whatever the method, the accuracy of their work is undeniable. Their calculations were so precise that they could predict eclipses and other celestial events with extraordinary accuracy, an almost magical feat for a time before telescopes and modern science. But here's the kicker. The monks didn't just use the stars to track the seasons and predict eclipses, they used them to track the end of time itself. The date of the world's end wasn't just a vague, distant idea to them. No, it was something real, something they could pinpoint. According to their calculations, the final date had already been set. It was written in the stars, and they believed it was just a matter of time before it arrived. Now imagine the moment when the monks, hunched over their parchment, quills scratching in near silence, uncover something that sends a chill through the room. They stare at the numbers, the alignments, and the dates, their faces pale in the flickering candlelight. The calculations point to a single, undeniable conclusion. The world as they knew it would end on a specific date. It wasn't a vague prophecy, it was a date, clearly marked in their celestial charts. The monks had worked tirelessly to chart the heavens. But this wasn't just about the celestial bodies. It was about something deeper. They believed the date of the world's end was written in sacred text and confirmed by the stars. This was no longer just a question of belief, it was a mathematical certainty. And here's where things get even more fascinating. The date they predicted, while long past, still resonates with us today. Some say the monks believed the end would come in the year 1000 AD. Others argue that it was later, in 1033, when they believed the second millennium would mark Christ's return. These predictions weren't made lightly. They were backed by scripture, by astronomical calculations, and by centuries of religious fervor. The monks were not only trying to chart time, they were trying to understand their place in the universe, to connect the divine with the earthly. They believed that by calculating time down to the very last detail, they could prepare for the inevitable conclusion. Historians still debate whether the monks truly believed the end of the world was near, or if they were simply following a long tradition of apocalyptic predictions. Some argue that the monks saw their work as a form of spiritual discipline, an exercise in understanding God's grand design. Others believe that the monks were genuinely frightened by what they saw in their calculations, that they believed their world was hurtling toward an unavoidable end. Either way, their predictions sparked fear and awe across medieval Europe. The thought that the world was on the verge of ending was a profound psychological burden, one that would have gripped the hearts of kings and peasants alike. But despite all the fear and tension that surrounded these predictions, the world didn't end. As the year 1000 passed, and then 1033, life went on. The monks, perhaps a bit relieved, continued their work, but the world's end didn't come as expected. Instead, they simply entered another chapter of history, perhaps a little wiser, a little more cautious in their calculations. It wasn't the world ending that they had missed. It was perhaps a realization that the end, as they had predicted it, was never really the point. It wasn't about marking the world's end. It was about finding a greater connection between heaven and earth, between the divine and the mortal. And in a sense, they succeeded in that, even if the apocalypse never arrived. As the years passed, the predictions of the monks slowly faded into history, but the legacy of their calculations remained embedded in the collective memory of Europe. You can imagine how strange it must have felt for the monks, now turning their quills to other tasks, their predictions unfulfilled. But time, it seems, was not something that could be so easily controlled. Despite their meticulous work, the end of time didn't arrive as predicted. The church, too, had to reconsider its relationship with time, no longer so focused on the apocalypse, but on the ongoing, perpetual rhythm of life. The monks, however, had done something profound with their work. They had drawn the world's attention to the fragility of human existence, to the fleeting nature of time. But they also created a space for humanity to reflect on its purpose, its place within the grand cycles of the universe. For the monks, time wasn't just something to be measured. It was something to be understood, to be lived in harmony with. They taught us that time, in all its glory and uncertainty, is sacred. And yet their influence didn't stop there. The idea of predicting the future through celestial signs and timekeeping would continue to echo through the centuries. The church would go on to shape the very foundations of Western civilization's understanding of time, from the establishment of the calendar to the measurement of hours. But the monks' celestial charts, their prophecies, and their belief in the importance of understanding time through the divine would leave an indelible mark on our cultural history. Even today, as you reflect on their work, you can see how their approach to time was ahead of its time. The monks didn't just want to count the days, they wanted to understand them, to feel their weight, and to decipher the cosmic order. Historians still debate whether they were simply misunderstood or if they were playing a greater cosmic game. Did they really believe the world would end, or were they, as some suggest, simply performing a ritualistic act of devotion by trying to decipher God's divine blueprint? Regardless of their intentions, their work left an undeniable legacy. Today, we still look to the heavens for answers, still marvel at the stars, still question the future. And even though we may have moved beyond the medieval view of time, there is something timeless in their efforts, their deep yearning to understand the vast, uncharted ocean of time and space. The years continued to pass, and the monks' predictions, once so urgent, faded into the quiet echoes of history. Yet as you stand in the silence of that long-forgotten scriptorium, you can almost feel the weight of their ambition. These monks, with their quills and their ancient parchment, weren't just trying to figure out the world's end. They were attempting to touch the divine. The idea that time itself was a divinely orchestrated force was a belief that permeated their very existence. Every tick of the clock, every turning of the page, every passing day was a step closer to God's plan. Time wasn't something humans could control. It was something they could interpret, live by, and most importantly, prepare for. Historians still argue whether the monks were just devout scholars, following tradition and prophecy, or if they were subtly challenging the very nature of time itself. Some suggest that they were testing their faith, pushing the boundaries of what they believed was divine knowledge. They were essentially asking, can we measure God's will in the cosmos? Can we predict the very end of time? And though their predictions never came to pass, their attempts to measure the infinite should not be dismissed. They sought to weave the fabric of their existence into a larger tapestry, one that spanned beyond the mortal coil and touched something far grander. But what of the legacy they left behind? Timekeeping itself was forever changed. The monks may not have predicted the end of the world, but their work still rippled through the centuries. In the monasteries, the rhythmic tolling of bells continued to mark the passage of time, and the Gregorian calendar, the product of the church's obsession with time, would guide the world into modernity. The monks' understanding of time as a cyclical force, intertwined with the divine, became embedded in our collective cultural consciousness. And even today, their efforts to tie human existence to the heavens resonate. In every clock tower, in every ticking second, in every passing year, we are reminded of the monks' quest to understand time, not as something to be controlled, but as something to be honored, understood, and revered. Their approach to time was, in a way of looking at life itself, full of mystery, full of waiting, and full of divine order. They asked the ultimate question, when will time run out? And while their predictions may have been wrong, their faith in the cycles of the universe was right on the mark. As the world continued, the monks' legacy remained. People still seek meaning in the passage of time. We look to the stars for answers, and we search for the patterns that might help us understand the vastness of our own existence. The monks in their candlelit rooms, seeking to understand the cosmic order, helped lay the foundation for that very quest. Time, after all, is not just a concept we measure, it's a force we feel. And it's in the spaces between those moments that the monk's legacy still echoes. As you sit in the stillness, you realize that the monk's quest for the end of time wasn't merely about the ticking of hours or the turn of days. They weren't just focused on predicting a specific moment in history. Instead, they were trying to grasp something far larger, the eternal pulse of the universe, the rhythm of existence itself. Time wasn't just a thing to be measured. It was something sacred, something that connected them to the heavens, to the divine. It was a divine pattern that guided them, shaped their actions, and anchored their understanding of life. In our modern world, we've lost a bit of that reverence for time, haven't we? We check the clock every 5 minutes, living in a constant hurry, calculating our next move before the previous one has even ended. The monks, however, lived in a different kind of rhythm. Their days were punctuated by prayer, reflection, and careful observation, all rooted in an understanding that the cosmos operated in cycles. Cycles of creation, destruction, and rebirth. Time wasn't something to be feared. It was something to be in harmony with, to flow with, to align oneself with the universe's pulse. Historians still argue whether the monks truly believed the world would end as they predicted, or if their apocalyptic calculations were simply part of their devotion to God's will. Some claim the monks were concerned only with spiritual matters, while others argue that they saw themselves as stewards of time, responsible for ensuring that humanity stayed aligned with divine order. Either way, their legacy is more than just about predicting a world's end. It's about their profound understanding of time as a living, breathing force, constantly renewing itself. The monks weren't merely trying to understand the end. They were seeking a deeper meaning, trying to understand the purpose behind each passing day. The quiet ticking of the clock in the monastery wasn't just a reminder of the hours slipping away. It was a reminder that every moment was connected to something bigger, something divine. The calendars they created, with their precise calculations and celestial alignments, weren't just tools for survival. They were instruments for understanding the divine order of the universe, a way of aligning human life with the eternal cycles of the cosmos. And though their predictions never came true, the monks' work left an indelible mark on history. Their study of time influenced everything from the way we measure our days to our understanding of the cosmos. We still rely on their systems to keep track of time, and their belief in the sacredness of time continues to shape our relationship with the universe. As the candle flickers one last time, and the first light of dawn breaks through the window, you realize that the monks' obsession with the end of time wasn't a mistake. It was a profound attempt to make sense of the chaos and mystery of the world. In their quiet pursuit of knowledge, they sought not just to measure time, but to understand it in a deeper, more meaningful way. Perhaps in our busy modern lives, we could all use a little of that reverence for time. After all, as the monks knew, time is not something we control. It's something we experience, something we are a part of, and something that, like the cycles of the heavens, is eternal. Imagine setting sail across the wild, unpredictable seas of the Viking Age, where the horizon stretches endlessly before you. The wind howls, bringing with it the promise of adventure and danger. Imagine yourself on a longship, black water lapping against your hull as you navigate a route known only to the bravest sailors. You probably wouldn't survive this ancient voyage without feeling a little disoriented, especially when you realize you're sailing into a storm and the sun has disappeared. How, you wonder, did these Vikings, masters of the sea, find their way without the modern wonders we take for granted today? The Vikings, those seafaring conquerors of the North, had no GPS, no magnetic compasses, and no reliable maps of the vast seas they crossed. Yet they managed to travel thousands of miles from Scandinavia to the shores of North America, navigating across the often treacherous waters with startling accuracy. While their ships were marvels of engineering, there was one other tool that truly set them apart. A tool so simple yet so effective that even today it still sparks fascination and mystery. That tool was the sunstone. Historians still argue whether the Vikings used sunstones as a navigation tool for sure, or if this was a myth passed down through the centuries. But what we do know is that Viking sagas, legends passed down through generations, tell of how these crystals helped guide their ships, particularly when the sun was hidden behind thick clouds or during the long, dark days of winter. The idea was simple yet ingenious. If you could see the sun, you could find your direction. And if you couldn't see it because of the weather, you could still track it with the help of a mysterious glowing stone. But how did they do it? The sunstone. It sounds almost magical, doesn't it? A glowing, radiant crystal that could guide the Vikings, even when the sun was nowhere to be found in the overcast sky. It's one of those things that seems so simple, yet so mysterious, something that modern technology has only recently started to understand. But for the Vikings, it was an essential tool in their navigation kit, allowing them to stay on course, even when their senses would otherwise fail them. The sunstone, also known as a polarizing crystal, worked by filtering the polarized light that the sun emitted. To understand this a bit better, picture yourself on the ship in the middle of a storm. The clouds above are thick and heavy, and the sky is a dull, oppressive gray. The sun should be somewhere up there, but you can't see it. The Vikings, however, could rely on the crystal's ability to filter the light. When light passes through a polarizing filter, it reveals the direction of the sun's rays, even if it's hidden behind clouds. Essentially, they were using nature's own light to navigate. Historians still debate how exactly the Vikings used these stones to navigate. Some believe they used a type of Iceland spar, a clear crystal that has remarkable polarizing properties. The crystals would have been placed in front of their eyes to see the direction of the sun by the way the light filtered through. Others think the Vikings might have used other stones, perhaps even tourmaline, to achieve the same effect. While we can't be completely sure of the exact method, it's clear that these stones were indispensable tools in their navigation, particularly when sailing at higher latitudes where the sun's position could be hard to track due to weather patterns and the tilt of the earth. In the midst of a storm, with waves crashing against the ship and the crew shouting commands, the sunstone would have provided a quiet, steady guide. The Vikings, relying on their finely honed skills and these natural tools, would steer their ships confidently toward their destination. But this wasn't just a matter of survival, it was a matter of fate. The Vikings believed that the gods themselves guided them on their voyages, and using the sunstone was just one way of aligning their efforts with divine will. Time, too, played a crucial role in this. The Vikings were keenly aware of the passing hours and days, but they understood that the natural world, including the sun's light, held the ultimate rhythm of time. By using the sunstone, they were tapping into that rhythm, ensuring their success and safety. Now, as you trudge along the deck of the Viking ship, the storm rages on. You're wet, cold, and struggling to stay on your feet as the crew works in unison, their eyes darting back and forth between the stormy skies and the polarizing crystal in their hands. There's something almost hypnotic about how the crystal shifts in the light, like it's alive, guiding you, pointing you in the right direction. The Vikings, accustomed to battling the elements, knew that they couldn't rely solely on the natural world. They had to work with it, understand it, and sometimes bend it to their will. You probably won't survive this, navigating through a tempest with only the faint glow of the sunstone and the distant rumble of thunder in the air. But the Vikings weren't so easily discouraged. They had faith in their tools and in themselves. The crystal wasn't just a magical object. It was a piece of technology that allowed them to conquer the seas, even when the sun was hiding. Imagine what it must have been like for these sailors, crossing the vast expanse of the open sea, where the horizon seemed endless, and every wave threatened to swallow them whole. The Viking ships, with their dragon-headed prow cutting through the water, were built for speed and agility, but the real secret to their success was the precision with which they navigated, thanks to their sunstones. Historians still debate the exact effectiveness of the sunstone. Some argue that the Vikings were able to rely solely on the crystal to guide them, while others suggest that it was just one part of a larger toolkit. After all, the Vikings didn't just use crystals. They also had a keen understanding of the stars, the winds, and even the tides. The crystal, however, served as a critical backup when the weather turned foul, when the sky was too overcast, and when they needed to trust something beyond mere guesswork. Perhaps the sunstone was the final touch that gave the Vikings their legendary confidence, allowing them to travel vast distances with an almost uncanny precision. But even with these incredible tools, sailing in such conditions wasn't foolproof. The Vikings knew that no matter how well they understood the seas, They could never control the weather. They relied on more than just their knowledge. They relied on their resilience. And in that moment, as you stand alongside them in the storm, you realize how much they trusted their instincts, their tools, and their understanding of the world. The crystal was just one of the many ways they reached into the unknown and made it their own. As the storm begins to calm and the clouds slowly break apart, the light of the sun begins to peek through the cracks, casting a golden glow on the water. You feel the ship steadying, the rough waves fading as the Viking sailors, guided by their sunstone, adjust their course. The light refracted through the crystal has revealed something extraordinary, the direction they needed to follow, even when the sun itself had been obscured. It's a humbling moment, realizing that something so simple, so small, this glowing stone, could guide them across vast oceans and through the most relentless of storms. This is where the sunstone really shines. Pun intended. You might think the Vikings were just lucky to have this tool, but the science behind it is surprisingly sophisticated. The sunstone works because of a property of light called polarization. Polarized light is light that has been filtered or refracted in a particular direction. When sunlight passes through the Earth's atmosphere, it scatters, and certain wavelengths of light align in a specific pattern. The sunstone, when held at the right angle, could detect this pattern and reveal the hidden direction of the sun. It essentially allowed the Vikings to find their way, even when the sun was hidden behind thick clouds, or during the long northern nights when the sun barely rises. Historians still argue whether the Vikings were consciously aware of the science behind their sunstone navigation. Some scholars think they may have had a deep, intuitive understanding of the science without necessarily knowing the technical details. Others suggest they might have simply relied on trial and error, discovering through generations of experience that the crystals worked in certain conditions. Regardless of how they learned to use it, one thing is clear. The Vikings' mastery of navigation, using both their knowledge of the stars and the mysterious sunstone, was ahead of its time. And here's the fascinating bit. While modern technology, like GPS, has rendered the sunstone obsolete, there's a growing interest in this ancient method of navigation. Scientists and historians are still fascinated by the Vikings' techniques, with some even attempting to use sunstones themselves. The allure of how such simple tools could navigate the vast, wild ocean is enough to make anyone pause and wonder. Could something so ancient, so rudimentary, be more accurate than we realize? Some modern experiments have shown that sunstones, when used correctly, can be surprisingly effective at pinpointing the sun's location, even when the sky is cloudy or the light is dim. So as the sun breaks free from the clouds and the Vikings adjust their sails, there's a sense of victory in the air. You're no longer lost at sea. The crystal, shining with a faint glow, has helped guide you home. It's a powerful reminder of the ingenuity and determination of these seafaring warriors who conquered not just lands, but the very elements themselves. They didn't have the technology we have today, but in many ways their ability to read the world around them and to use the natural tools available was far more sophisticated than we give them credit for. As the ship continues its journey, the Vikings seem almost at peace now. The storm has passed, and the crew settles into a rhythm, their sails catching the wind, as the sunstone, now dimmed by the rising sun, is carefully stowed away. The crystal that guided them through the storm has completed its task, but the Vikings know better than to rely on it alone. They know the journey isn't just about one tool, one piece of knowledge. It's about the combination of their understanding of the stars, the tides, the winds, and, of course, their instincts. This is what made them such extraordinary navigators. Historians still argue over how widely the Vikings used sunstones. Some suggest that these magical-sounding stones were perhaps more of a symbolic tool than a practical one, used in conjunction with other more reliable forms of navigation, like the sun's position at midday or the North Star at night. Others believed that the sunstone was just as essential as any other navigation tool, even in bad weather. The Viking sagas, the epic tales of their journeys and adventures, tell stories of how these men traveled across the seas with nothing more than their ships, their stars, and their knowledge of the natural world. Whether it was a symbolic tool or a powerful piece of technology, one thing is certain: the Vikings were masters of the sea, and the sunstone, in its quiet way, played a role in that mastery. But what if it was more than just a tool? What if, in the Vikings' eyes, the sunstone was also a symbol of their connection to the divine? The Vikings, like many ancient cultures, saw the natural world not just as something to be studied and understood, but as something to be revered. They believed the gods and nature were intimately connected, that the natural world spoke to them in signs and symbols. Perhaps the sunstone, with its mystical properties, was seen as a divine gift, a way for the gods to guide their ships through the treacherous waters. The idea that the Vikings may have viewed their navigation in a spiritual light adds another layer of intrigue to the story of their travels. It's easy for us today to dismiss their methods as primitive, to think that their understanding of the world was limited. But the more we study their techniques, the more we realize that the Vikings weren't just warriors. They were sophisticated explorers, using the tools at their disposal to navigate the vast and unpredictable oceans. What we see as rudimentary is, in many ways, a glimpse into the kind of ingenuity that drove these explorers to go further, to venture farther than anyone had before. The sunstone was just one small, glowing piece of that picture, but it was one that allowed them to face the storms with confidence, to venture into unknown seas, and to conquer an unforgiving world. As the journey continues, the landscape begins to change. The cold winds of the northern seas give way to calmer, more temperate waters, and the Vikings, now seasoned with experience, sail ever forward, their destination on the horizon. But the question lingers: how much of their success was due to sheer will, and how much was thanks to the use of these extraordinary tools, like the sunstone? For centuries, the Vikings have remained a symbol of exploration, daring, and resilience. But it's clear that their secret was not just in their ships or their weapons. It was in their deep understanding of the world around them and their ability to use the natural forces to their advantage. Today, historians and scientists are still fascinated by the sunstone, looking for clues in the archaeological record to better understand how this simple yet ingenious tool worked. There's a growing interest in ancient navigation methods, and in a way, the Vikings are leading the charge once again. Modern navigators and adventurers, fascinated by these ancient techniques, are experimenting with sunstones to see if they can replicate the Vikings to navigate without the modern technologies we rely on today. And while we may never fully unlock all the secrets of the sunstone, we do know this: the Vikings' ability to navigate and understand the natural world was beyond their time. The Vikings, with their sunstones, didn't just conquer lands, they conquered the sea itself. They became one with the waters they sailed on, guided by forces older and more powerful than themselves, yet within their grasp. Whether it was the sunstone pointing them to the light, the stars guiding them by night, or their own indomitable spirit that refused to let them fail, they understood that the natural world was both their challenge and their ally. And perhaps as you lean back and allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep tonight, you'll think about how the Vikings did it, not with machines or gadgets, but with their own eyes, hands, and the raw knowledge of the world around them. In a world that often feels governed by technology and devices, maybe there's something to be said for the simplicity of navigating by the stars, trusting in the tools that nature gives you, and understanding your place in the universe, just as the Vikings did. As the gentle winds of time carry you forward, remember, sometimes the brightest guiding light is the one we already carry inside us. Imagine it's midnight, the full moon casting a silvery light over the kingdom, when suddenly, without warning, the moon begins to darken. It's not clouds. You can see it clearly. The moon itself is covered by a shadow, a deep, strange shadow growing larger and larger, creeping across the moon's surface, and the stars begin to disappear. It's an eclipse. The air feels thick, almost suffocating, and a sense of doom creeps in among the people, and most notably, the king. A strange, inexplicable panic. You probably won't survive this journey into the medieval mind without feeling the same unease creeping up your spine. For kings, this celestial event could mean one thing: betrayal. Back in medieval times, kings didn't have Twitter or modern news outlets to alert them to impending danger. No, instead, they looked to the heavens, the stars, the sun, the moon, and believed that the movements of these celestial bodies were messages from the divine. When an eclipse occurred, it wasn't just a natural phenomenon to be studied and explained. It was a sign of something momentous, a sign that the fates were changing. The idea of fate and divine intervention was central to medieval life. And for a king, the heavens were more than just a backdrop to his rule. They were a direct reflection of his power and the stability of his reign. An eclipse? That was a cosmic disruption, and disruptions of that magnitude could only mean one thing: something bad was coming. Something was about to go terribly wrong. Now imagine you're sitting in the royal court, surrounded by advisors, nobles, and the high-ranking clergy. The day's proceedings are interrupted by an eerie hush as the sky darkens. It's not just an ordinary cloud passing over the sun. No, something more sinister is at play. The eclipse is beginning. The advisors exchange nervous glances, and you can feel the tension rise. The king, sitting at the head of the table, is growing increasingly anxious. It's not just that the moon is blocking the sun, but that an omen of this magnitude is impossible to ignore. The shadow across the sky is the shadow of fate, and to the medieval mind, it is an unmistakable sign of impending disaster. Historians still argue whether medieval kings truly believed that eclipses were divine warnings of betrayal, or if this belief was exaggerated by the fear and paranoia that dominated the time. Some scholars suggest that the eclipse was a tool used by astrologers and seers to manipulate royal courts, capitalizing on the anxiety of their rulers. Either way, the fact remains that for kings, these celestial events were far more than mere curiosities. The heavens were in motion, and with them, the very order of the world seemed to shift. This wasn't just a natural event, it was an invitation for political unrest. And the king, as the earthly representative of divine order, couldn't afford to appear vulnerable. When an eclipse occurred, especially one that was visible over the kingdom, it was often seen as a divine warning of some great change, usually something negative. The common belief was that an eclipse marked the anger of the gods, and that the king, as the leader of the people, was directly tied to the will of the divine. If something went wrong during an eclipse, if there was a military defeat or a rebellion or worse, a king could be seen as having failed in his duty, as having lost the divine favor that his rule depended on. And that failure? Well, it could cost him his throne. Eclipses often heralded a shifting of power, as the king's rule was associated with the stability of the natural world. The medieval idea was that if the sun and moon could be blotted out, then so too could the king's power. The moment the eclipse started, it became a ticking clock. The king knew that an opportunity for political maneuvering, maybe even betrayal, was imminent. His enemies, those quietly waiting in the shadows, could use the eclipse as the perfect cover to strike, to claim that the king had lost his divine right to rule. In that moment, everything could change. As the moon completely covers the sun, the light around you dims. It's as if the entire world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. In the royal court, the tension is palpable. The king's face tightens as he watches the eclipse unfold. The advisors, once confident in their counsel, are now murmuring prayers under their breath, and the courtiers begin to whisper amongst themselves. Outside, the sky takes on an unnatural, twilight hue, casting long shadows over the kingdom. It's not just the people who are uneasy, it's the very air itself, charged with the uncertainty of what's to come. The fear that gripped medieval monarchs during an eclipse was rooted in the belief that such celestial events were not random. No, these were messages from the heavens, from the gods themselves. An eclipse was a cosmic disruption that could signal a deeper, more insidious change. For kings, this meant that their divine right to rule was at risk. If the gods were angry enough to block out the sun, surely that anger could be redirected toward the king. And in this climate of uncertainty, there was always someone waiting to seize power. Historians still argue whether the eclipse was seen as a sign of betrayal in the way the royal courts believed, or whether it was more a reflection of the general anxiety of the age. Some suggest that the eclipse simply served as a tool for courtly intrigue, giving those who sought to usurp the throne an excuse to act. Others believe that the eclipse's power lay in its sheer unpredictability, the way it seemed to erase the natural order of the universe. For a king whose position was built upon the idea of maintaining cosmic balance, the eclipse could be seen as a literal sign that the balance had shifted. It's easy to forget how deeply medieval kings believed in their connection to the divine. The king was seen not just as a ruler, but as a conduit between God and his people. If the natural world faltered, if the sun itself was momentarily consumed by darkness, then the king's connection to God was in question. It wasn't just political instability that these kings feared, it was spiritual crisis. The eclipse wasn't just a celestial event, it was a cosmic judgment. The king had to prove he was worthy of divine favor, and in moments of uncertainty, that worthiness was in question. It's said that, after witnessing an eclipse, some kings went into a period of introspection. They consulted astrologers, sought out religious counsel, and made offerings to the gods, desperate to restore favor and balance. For the common people, the eclipse was a sign of a change to come, a moment to prepare for the shifting tides of power. And for the king, it was an uncomfortable reminder that their rule, no matter how strong, was always just a shadow's length away from falling. As the eclipse reaches its full peak, you can almost feel the weight of history pressing in. The shadow of the moon spreads across the land, and for a brief moment, the world feels wrong, unnatural. The king, sitting upon his throne, is no longer the unshakable symbol of power. In this moment of cosmic upheaval, his fate seems as uncertain as the world around him. You can almost hear the murmurs of the courtiers growing louder, more urgent, as they try to make sense of this celestial event. The courtiers, especially the ones who've always been waiting for a chance to rise in the ranks, are watching carefully. Perhaps they see this as an opportunity. The king is vulnerable. The gods have spoken, and it seems that they've turned their gaze away from him. Historians still argue about how much influence these cosmic events had on the fate of a ruler. Some suggest that the fear of eclipses was more superstition than substance, that kings simply exploited the fear of such events to justify their own anxieties. Others argue that the fear of an eclipse was very real and could lead to actual political consequences. Monarchs deeply concerned with their legitimacy understood that their rule was bound to divine favor. When that favor seemed in question, power structures began to falter. Even the most secure throne could start to shake. The eclipse wasn't just a fear of the gods. It was a reminder that the divine world and the earthly world were intertwined, and an imbalance in the heavens could tip the scales on earth. For some, the eclipse could signal the beginning of political maneuvers. Ambitious nobles might take advantage of the chaos and uncertainty that followed these celestial events. If the king believed that his rule was in danger, he might turn to his advisors, to astrologers, and to courtly sycophants who would try to convince him of his impending downfall. This cycle of fear and manipulation wasn't new. It was a pattern that unfolded whenever a monarch's legitimacy came into question. And the eclipse, in all its mystery, was the perfect backdrop for such intrigues. The darkness wasn't just physical, it was psychological, creating an atmosphere ripe for doubt and distrust. As the eclipse begins to wane and light slowly returns, so does the reality of the political world. The king may have feared the loss of divine favor, but now that the shadow has passed, he must decide how to react. Does he treat the event as a sign of divine displeasure? Does he seek out penance, change his policies, or even cede power to a rival faction? Or does he dismiss the eclipse as nothing more than a natural occurrence, trusting in his strength and the legitimacy of his reign? Some kings did, but the consequences of ignoring such a powerful symbol were often far-reaching. As the light of the sun slowly returns, the land is bathed in a soft glow. The eclipse fades into the past, but its effects linger, hovering in the minds of the king and his court. The aftershock of the celestial event doesn't dissipate quickly. You can almost feel the tension in the air as the advisors rush to the king's side, seeking to interpret the meaning of the eclipse. Some will counsel action, suggesting that the king make public gestures of humility or penance, showing that he is still worthy of divine favor. Others will argue that the event was nothing more than a natural occurrence, no different than the changing seasons, and that the king's authority remains unshaken. The decisions the king makes in the wake of the eclipse will shape not only his reign, but the stability of the entire kingdom. Historians still argue whether medieval kings truly feared the physical consequences of an eclipse, or whether their fears were purely political, based on superstition and the frailty of their power. Some suggest that kings often use these celestial events to justify their behavior or to explain away misfortune, ascribing it to the anger of the gods rather than personal failure. But one thing is certain: the eclipse, for all its scientific explanations, was seen as a profound symbol of change. Whether or not the king believed it was the will of the gods, he could not afford to dismiss the symbolism of the event. The momentary darkness had cast shadows not just across the moon, but across the king's rule. In the aftermath, power struggles are bound to unfold. Whether it's nobles pushing for more influence or rival factions exploiting the fear and uncertainty that followed the eclipse, there is always someone ready to take advantage of a moment of weakness. Kings who were already unpopular or insecure might use the eclipse as an excuse to change policies, adopt new advisors, or tighten their grip on power. For others, the event might spark genuine introspection as the monarch turns inward to question his ability to govern. Was the eclipse truly a sign from the heavens? Should he worry? The question looms over the king like a storm cloud, even as the world around him settles into relative calm. Meanwhile, the common people watch from afar, unsure of what to make of the event. To them, the eclipse is both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a reminder that the forces of nature, gods, fate, and the heavens, are still very much in control. As the days pass and the kingdom returns to its routine, the shadow of the eclipse will fade from the collective consciousness, but it will leave a mark on the history books. The king's response, or lack thereof, will be scrutinized for generations to come, his actions viewed as either a sign of strength or of vulnerability. In the end, the true impact of the eclipse is not just in the darkened skies, but in how the fear of the unknown plays out in the human world. It serves as a reminder that in a time when life was shaped by divine and natural forces, even the smallest shift in the heavens could disrupt kingdoms and shake thrones. And though the event itself may pass, its consequences ripple out far beyond the moment, altering the course of history in ways no one could predict. As time moves on, the eclipse becomes a distant memory, but its echoes are still felt in the royal chambers. The king has made his choices. He's either heeded the warnings or dismissed them, perhaps made public gestures of piety or sought counsel from the stars. His actions, whether driven by superstition or real fear, have set the stage for the future. And yet the question remains, was the eclipse truly an omen or simply a natural event that triggered a cascade of human reactions? Fear, doubt, and betrayal. Historians still debate this, sifting through ancient records, looking for patterns in the behavior of monarchs during these celestial events. One thing is clear, though. The fear of the eclipse had a profound impact on medieval politics. Monarchs who saw themselves as divinely chosen could not afford to ignore such signs. The very foundation of their rule rested on the belief that their authority came from a higher power. When that power appeared to waver, when the skies themselves were disrupted, it threatened the legitimacy of their reign. Eclipses served as powerful reminders that, in the grand cosmic order, even kings were vulnerable. No matter how strong their thrones seemed, it was always at the mercy of the heavens. The memory of the eclipse lingers in the court, subtly affecting decisions, alliances, and actions. The political fallout may not always be immediate, but the reverberations can be felt for years to come. Monarchs who believed they had narrowly escaped disaster may tighten their grip, becoming more paranoid and distrustful. Others may seek reassurance, turning to the church, astrologers, or the wisdom of prophets. These celestial events didn't just affect the ruler in the moment. They shaped their entire approach to governance, leadership, and their relationship with both the divine and their subjects. But the legacy of these eclipses isn't just political, it's cultural. For the common people, the eclipse was a moment of awe and fear, a sign that the natural world still held sway over their lives. The stories and myths surrounding these events would be passed down through generations, becoming part of the folklore that shaped the collective consciousness of the medieval world. Eclipses weren't just cosmic occurrences. They were stories waiting to be told, tales of divine judgment, betrayal, and redemption. And as the years passed, these stories evolved, adapting to new generations, taking on new meanings, but always carrying the weight of that initial fear and uncertainty. In the end, the medieval belief in celestial omens reminds us how deeply the natural world shaped human history. The fear of eclipses, though rooted in superstition, was tied to a fundamental understanding of human vulnerability. The heavens were not just a backdrop for human life. They were active participants in the drama of existence. And whether it was an eclipse, a comet, or a star, these natural phenomena were seen as direct communication from the gods, warnings of change, and signs that could alter the fate of kingdoms. The legacy of that fear, of interpreting every shadow as a threat, every darkened sky as a prelude to disaster, still lingers in us today. It's a reminder that, no matter how far we've come, there's something primal in the human need to find meaning in the world above. A comet blazing across the night sky, a Roman general believing it's a divine sign, and an army marching into battle under the watchful eyes of the heavens. Imagine this. You're walking under a sky that's lit up by an otherworldly light, the tail of a comet streaming through the air like a fiery river stretching across the stars. It's almost as if the universe itself is sending you a message. But what's the message? Victory? Doom? Well, here's the thing. You probably won't survive this. It's 66 BCE. You're in a world where superstition and divine omens are part of everyday life. The Roman Republic is in turmoil, its leaders bickering, its soldiers marching in countless campaigns. The skies above are supposed to reflect the whims of the gods, and right now, the gods seem to be sending a clear message. The comet is streaking across the heavens, its fiery tail blazing like a divine flare, lighting up the darkness. For you and your fellow soldiers, There's no question that this comet is not just some random astronomical event. It's a sign. The question is, what kind of sign is it? You can feel the electricity in the air as the comet burns bright. Every soldier is watching it, some with awe, others with a touch of fear. And then there's your general, Gaius Aurelius. He's not just watching it, he's believing in it. The comet, he claims, is a divine endorsement of his military genius and the campaign ahead. It's almost like a cosmic blessing, a celestial guarantee that victory is inevitable. Whether it's hubris or faith in the gods, the general doesn't hesitate to let his soldiers know that the heavens are on their side. Now let's rewind a bit and talk about the general himself, the man whose name is becoming synonymous with ambition and military success. Gaius Aurelius, a man who believes that he's chosen by the gods, feels that this comet is the heavens confirming his destiny. You've been hearing about his rise through the ranks for years, his tactical brilliance, his unyielding confidence, and his knack for turning the tides of battle. As he stands there, looking up at the comet, it's clear he sees himself not just as a general, but as an instrument of divine will. And if the gods are with him, who's going to challenge his right to victory? Historians still argue whether Aurelius was truly divinely favored or just a shrewd manipulator of public perception. Some say his belief in the comet's power was more of a personal conviction, while others think he was using it as a tool to rally his troops. Either way, it doesn't change the fact that the comet, whether it was a fluke or a divine sign, was about to play a pivotal role in the story that would unfold. You've seen generals and leaders use divine omens before to inspire their soldiers, but there's something different about this one. It's as though the universe itself is setting the stage. There's no denying it. The comet's presence in the sky is commanding. It has the power to make men believe that they are part of something far bigger than themselves. And so, as the army marches beneath this fiery streak across the heavens, something shifts. Fear and excitement mix in equal measure. You've heard the stories of battles won and lost under similar omens, and now you're about to be part of one of them. Every step you take beneath the comet feels like it's guiding you towards something monumental. Whether it's victory or something darker, you can't quite tell. You can't help but look up one more time at that comet as it lights the night sky. It feels almost as if it's watching you, waiting like a silent observer to your fate. And when you look back down, you realize that it's not just the sky that's been lit up. Your own heart is racing, your senses heightened. The comet is in the air, but it's in you too, stirring something deep down, something primal. As the army continues to march, there's no turning back now. Victory or defeat, it's all written in the stars. Or so the general believes. The army moves forward, and as you march, it becomes clear. This isn't just any ordinary military campaign. The comet, streaking brightly across the sky above, feels more like a supernatural force than a simple celestial phenomenon. And then there's your general, Gaius Aurelius. While most soldiers would be sweating over the looming battle ahead, Aurelius seems oddly calm. His eyes are locked on the comet, his lips murmuring something like a prayer or a mantra. He's not just a general. In his eyes, he's the man chosen by the heavens. You can almost feel the weight of his ambition on your shoulders as you march beside him, the comet's tail burning above. The general is not new to ambition. He's fought in battles before, risen through the ranks with his tactical brilliance, and his name is beginning to make waves in the Roman military elite. But this time feels different. It's not just about victory or glory. Aurelius has set his sights on something greater. He sees himself as a chosen leader, and the comet in the sky is, in his eyes, nothing short of divine validation. The soldiers around you are starting to pick up on it too. Some are skeptical, of course. After all, not everyone in the Roman army is ready to believe that a flaming rock in the sky is the key to victory. But those who are with Aurelius, they believe. They believe that this comet is more than a mere omen. It's a celestial endorsement. Historians still debate whether Aurelius was truly a man of faith or just a brilliant tactician who knew how to manipulate public perception. Some argue that he was a man of exceptional political savvy, using the comet as a tool to galvanize his troops and make them feel invincible. Others suggest that he genuinely believed in the omen's power, that his rise was part of a grander cosmic plan. Whether divine intervention or pure strategy, one thing is for sure: the comet had an undeniable effect on the morale of the army. It wasn't just a streak in the sky, it was the symbol of their fate. As you march along, there's a strange sensation in the air. The comet, bright and unwavering, has cast a surreal glow over everything. The night is quieter than usual. The rhythmic tramp of boots on the earth beneath you is the only sound that cuts through the stillness. Yet it's strangely comforting. The battlefield ahead feels distant, almost like an illusion. There's a sense of invincibility in the air, the belief that the gods themselves have placed their trust in the army of Aurelius. You've heard whispers among the soldiers. The gods are on our side, and they say, we're destined to win. Even the most skeptical among them can't help but feel the pull of the comet's presence. It's a reassurance, a promise of victory. At least that's how it feels. But for you, the weight of this belief is heavy. You can't help but wonder, how much of this is true divine intervention, and how much of it is just Aurelius's to control the narrative? After all, men have risen and fallen in the name of the gods for centuries, but none quite like this. You're not the only one questioning the power of the omen. Not every soldier is convinced. There are those who are more pragmatic, who know that a comet, while impressive, doesn't fight wars. Yet even the most doubtful of you can't deny that the atmosphere has shifted. There's an electric tension in the air, as though the comet itself is breathing life into the soldiers. And if you're honest, part of you wants to believe. You're walking under a sign from the gods. Why not hold on to that hope? Still, as you continue your march, the thought crosses your mind. Does it matter if the comet is real or if it's just a cleverly timed bit of cosmic coincidence? Aurelius believes in it, and that belief is infectious. His confidence isn't just inspiring, it's transforming. The more the comet blazes above, the more it feels like a beacon guiding the army towards some great destiny. Whether it's true divine will or simply the power of belief, it doesn't matter. The army is with Aurelius, and that's enough to make them feel unstoppable. As you draw closer to the battlefield, the comet's glow feels even more intense. It's like it's been guiding you this whole time, its light brightening the road ahead, casting long shadows on the ground. The army is practically buzzing with anticipation, with every soldier marching in unison under the comet's watchful eye. Some talk of how this celestial omen has marked them as the chosen ones, how they're destined to claim victory. There's no hesitation in their steps. They're walking toward glory, and the comet is leading them. But even with all this faith, you know the truth. No matter how much belief is woven into this campaign, the real battle will be fought with steel and blood. The comet may be a divine omen, or it may just be a comet. The question is, will the belief in this omen be enough to turn the tide of battle in your favor? Or will it all fall apart once the dust settles, the comet fades, and the reality of war sets in? As the army approaches the enemy stronghold, the comet above you continues to burn brightly, and for a moment, it almost feels like the universe itself is holding its breath. The battle is about to begin, and in this moment, you can't help but wonder if the heavens are truly on your side, or if you're just marching into a trap set by fate itself. The night grows colder as you march closer to the battlefield. You can hear the distant rumble of the army's preparations, shouts, the clatter of armor being adjusted, the final orders being barked out to ensure every soldier is in position. The comet above, now high in the sky, seems even more vivid, its tail blazing like a divine path laid out before you. Some soldiers are whispering prayers, Others muttering superstitions, anything to get them through the nerves building with every step. The general Gaius Aurelius doesn't seem to share their anxiety. He walks ahead, calm, unshaken, his eyes still locked on that comet. His every movement exudes confidence, and it's contagious. The soldiers behind him are starting to feel it too. Whatever happens here, they truly believe they're on the right side of history. And who knows? Maybe they're right. As you take your place within the ranks, you can't help but overhear snippets of conversation. Aurelius is chosen, one soldier says. This comet proves it. Another shakes his head, muttering, "It's just a rock. A sign from the gods won't win a battle." But as the comet stretches its fiery arc across the sky, you can't help but feel a pull. It's like a silent cheerleader, cheering you on from the heavens. You start to feel that maybe, just maybe, the gods are indeed watching. The comet is the symbol of your destiny, of victory, of something greater. But despite all the excitement in the air, there's still a gnawing uncertainty within you. You know that the enemy ahead isn't some ragtag bunch of rebels. They're well-trained, just as battle-hardened as your own troops. The battlefield ahead is going to be brutal. Comets, divine signs, and celestial omens won't win this one. It's going to come down to strategy, tactics, and the will to fight. Yet every time you look up, the comet's brilliant tail reminds you that something bigger than yourself is at play. It's a symbol of fate, and right now, fate feels like it's on your side. Historians still debate whether the comet's presence in the sky had any real influence on the outcome of the battle. Some argue it was merely a coincidence, just an astronomical event that happened to coincide with the campaign. Others believe that Aurelius used the comet as a psychological weapon, a way to boost morale and inspire his troops to fight with a belief in victory. Whether it was a tool of strategy or divine intervention, one thing's for sure, it had an undeniable effect on the soldiers. As the enemy's stronghold draws nearer, the tension grows. You can hear the clash of metal as your comrades make their final preparations. The generals and officers are in heated discussions, reviewing battle strategies and formation adjustments. And then, just as everything seems ready to explode into chaos, Gaius Aurelius steps forward and calls for attention. His voice rings out across the ranks, loud and clear, and you can feel the weight of every word he speaks. "We are not just soldiers," he says, his voice carrying over the crowd. "We are the chosen ones, marked by the gods. The comet above us is proof. We march into this battle not with uncertainty, but with the blessing of the heavens themselves. Victory is already ours. Believe in that his words reverberate in the air like a chant. And for a moment, you feel it too. That surge of belief, the kind that only comes when you're part of something bigger than yourself. The comet, in that instant, feels like more than a streak in the sky. It feels like a shield that's protecting you, a banner that's lifting you higher. You start to believe, just for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, victory really is assured. As the battle horns sound in the distance, you march forward, the air thick with anticipation. The comet blazes above, a fiery reminder that you are part of something greater. The army follows behind, their movements synchronized, fueled by the belief that they are destined for greatness. But deep down, you know that no amount of divine favor can guarantee victory in war. The real battle, the one that will decide the fate of all of you, is about to begin. And all you can do is fight like your life depends on it, because, well, it does. The sound of war drums grows louder, signaling the start of the battle. There's no more time for doubt. The comet's glow seems to intensify as you step onto the field. You've come this far, and now you're about to find out if the gods are truly with you, or if you've been fooled by your own faith. The weight of the comet above you, the soldiers at your side, and the roar of the enemy ahead. All of it becomes one unified moment. The stakes are higher than ever. It's now or never. You're standing at the precipice of history. The battle will be decided in mere moments, and there's nothing more you can do but fight. So with one final look up at the comet streaking across the sky, you prepare yourself for what's to come. Victory or defeat, the gods will have their say, but you'll make sure that your part in this story is a fight to remember. The first clash of the battle is deafening, a violent crescendo of swords, shields, and the cries of men locked in mortal struggle. The sound rips through the air, drowning out all but the pure adrenaline that pulses through your veins. The comet, still blazing overhead, feels almost like a distant observer, watching, judging, as you and your comrades fight for your lives. It's no longer just an omen or a symbol, it's become a living thing in the sky, a constant reminder that you're fighting under its divine light. The battle ahead is as brutal as you expected, but in the back of your mind, the comet is there, a flickering presence that makes you feel as though you're not just fighting for survival, but for something greater. Aurelius's words echo in your ears. Victory is already ours. Believe in that. It's like a mantra, repeated over and over by soldiers as they charge forward. There's no hesitation, no fear in their movements. Just the unwavering belief that the gods have chosen them for this moment. Even the men who were once doubtful are caught up in the tide of faith. You've heard it on the battlefield before, how belief can push men to do extraordinary things, but this feels different. This isn't just hope or determination. This is the conviction that victory is inevitable, as if the very universe has aligned to ensure it. And then, for a brief moment, the battle becomes a blur of chaos. The clash of iron, the thundering of horses, the grunts of soldiers trying to gain the upper hand. Everything merges into a violent symphony that you can hardly keep track of. You're focused on surviving, on doing your part in the struggle, but there's something about the comet overhead that keeps pulling your attention. Every time you look up, the fiery streak is still there, its tail trailing across the heavens like a divine banner. It's a constant presence, reminding you that no matter how difficult things get, you're under its watchful gaze. Historians still debate whether the belief in the comet's power played a significant role in the battle's outcome, or whether the tactical superiority of Gaius Aurelius was what truly secured the victory. Some argue that belief in the comet gave the soldiers an edge, boosting morale and making them fight harder, while others suggest that Aurelius's military genius was the real determining factor. But what's undeniable is that the comet's influence on the soldiers' mindset was profound. It gave them a sense of divine purpose, one that made them fight with a ferocity and conviction that might not have been there otherwise. As you push forward, your sword raised high, the battle rages on around you. The air is thick with the stench of sweat, blood, and the acrid scent of fire. But through it all, there's a strange clarity in your mind. The comet above you continues to burn brightly, casting an eerie glow on everything below. For a fleeting moment, it almost feels as though time itself is standing still, as though the heavens are watching every move. And in this moment of surreal stillness, you realize that the battle is no longer about you. It's about the fate of the entire army. It's about proving that you and the men around you are part of something larger, something written in the stars. The soldiers fighting alongside you seem to be feeding off the same energy. They're not just fighting for their lives, they're fighting for something bigger. Their belief is contagious. The men charging forward seem to move with a unity that's almost supernatural. It's like the comet is guiding them, pushing them forward with an unseen hand. Every time you glance up, you feel a strange pull in your chest, like the universe is rooting for you. And maybe, just maybe, it is. The battle stretches on, but the tide seems to be turning in your favor. The enemy, once a formidable force, is starting to falter. Their ranks are thinning, their morale weakening. It's as though the very belief in the comet is slowly crushing them. While the Romans march forward with renewed purpose, the enemy soldiers begin to lose their fight. It's not just the better training or superior tactics that's driving this change. It's the overwhelming conviction that this battle was always meant to be yours. The comet is no longer just a symbol, it's an active participant in the battle itself. By the time the enemy's lines begin to break, there's a moment of pure triumph in the air. The sound of retreating soldiers fills the battlefield as their morale crumbles completely. You've fought through the chaos, and now it feels like victory is within your grasp. The gods, it seems, have truly smiled upon you. As the battle winds down, the battlefield is littered with the fallen, both the victorious and the defeated. The comet's light continues to shine, unmoved by the carnage below. For a brief moment, you find yourself standing in the silence of the aftermath, staring up at the heavens. The light of the comet is as bright as ever, and for the first time, you feel as though you've truly been part of something grand, something cosmic. Your survival, your victory, it feels less like a personal triumph and more like a confirmation of a greater plan. The General Aurelius is moving among his soldiers now, his face alight with triumph. He speaks in a voice full of pride, his hands raised to the sky. This victory, he proclaims, was not just ours, it was the gods. And in that moment, for the first time, you start to believe him. There's no denying that the battle has been won. And whether or not it was the comet that led you to this victory, you can't help but feel a surge of gratitude, of awe, for the part you played in it. You've survived, you've won, and maybe, just maybe, you were chosen for this moment. The comet still hangs in the sky, its tail now fading into the distance. But its legacy, Aurelius's victory, the army's belief, and the triumph of a seemingly divine sign will live on. Victory. You stand in the aftermath of the battle, surrounded by the remnants of a fight that could have easily gone either way. The bodies of the fallen, both Romans and enemies, litter the field, and the once raging clamor of battle has now given way to the eerie quiet of the aftermath. You can hear the faint sounds of soldiers tending to the wounded, the muttered prayers of gratitude, and the final commands being given by Aurelius's officers to secure the area. In the distance, the comet still hangs in the sky, its tail no longer as brilliant as before, but still visible, an almost surreal reminder of the event that has just unfolded. The burning celestial object above was the symbol that guided you here, the omen that turned this battle into something destined, inevitable, and even now, it feels like you were part of a much larger story. But now that the dust is settling, you wonder, was it truly divine favor that led to this victory, or was it just coincidence? The days following the battle are filled with mixed emotions. Victory has been achieved, but there's a lingering unease. The army is celebrated for its triumph, but you can't shake the feeling that something bigger is at play. Aurelius, of course, sees this as confirmation of his divine destiny. He's already making plans to return to Rome, to proclaim his victory, and to convince the masses that his rise is not just a result of military brilliance, but of a direct blessing from the gods themselves. His speeches echo with the certainty that the comet was a sign of divine favor, and the soldiers, most of them, are too willing to follow his lead. Some, however, remain skeptical, quietly questioning whether it was truly the gods who led them to victory, or if it was simply Aurelius's strategic genius and the sheer strength of the Roman army. Historians still argue about the role of the comet in this battle and the subsequent rise of Gaius Aurelius. Some view him as a master manipulator, someone who used the comet as a psychological tool to boost morale and keep his army united under a common cause. Others believed that his faith in the omen was genuine, that he truly believed the gods were guiding his every move. It's hard to say for sure, especially since Aurelius has taken the narrative into his own hands. His rise continues, and with it, the story of the comet's divine blessing. It becomes part of Roman legend, passed down in stories and songs, until the comet itself becomes a symbol of fate, victory, and the power of belief. But as you sit there, in the quiet of the victory camp, you can't help but feel that the comet wasn't just about Aurelius. It was about something more. The soldiers who fought that day, the men who believed in the comet, they were a part of something much bigger than they realized. Perhaps the true victory was not just the defeat of the enemy, but the collective belief in something larger than themselves. The comet didn't just guide the general, it guided the entire army, binding them together under a shared faith that transcended the physical battle before them. That said, as the weeks go by and the celebrations in Rome grow louder, there's an undeniable feeling of doubt creeping in. Was it really divine intervention that led to victory? Or was it just the perfect combination of circumstances, Aurelius's cunning, and the strength of Rome's military machine? The more you think about it, the more it feels like the comet's role in this campaign was just a convenient myth, a story that Aurelius was happy to promote to maintain his power and status. Still, there's something about that comet that lingers in your mind, an image burned into your memory. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't all just coincidence. As time passes, the comet fades from view, its fiery tail disappearing into the distant reaches of the cosmos. The memory of the battle, the victory, and the celestial omen begins to fade as well. Aurelius's name grows in power, his influence spreading throughout the Republic. He is celebrated, his rise to power seemingly ordained by the gods themselves. Yet as the years go by, the story of the comet becomes less about the event itself and more about the myth it created. The legend of Gaius Aurelius, the general who claimed the comet was his ally, grows stronger, and the comet becomes a symbol, a celestial endorsement that grants him authority in the eyes of Rome. But what of you? You fought in that battle, marched beneath the comet, and lived to tell the tale. Your role in the larger story is clear to you now, but to history, you'll always be just one of many soldiers caught up in the tide of fate. And yet there's a part of you that still believes, still wonders whether the comet really did have a hand in your victory, whether it was truly divine intervention or just the belief in it. The outcome would never have been the same without that celestial sign. In the end, the comet fades into the distance, and so too does the memory of the battle. But the impact of that night lingers on, embedded in the hearts of those who marched beneath it. Was it fate? Was it belief? Or was it simply the will of one man who seized an opportunity and turned it into something greater? Historians will continue to argue about it, but for you, the soldier who stood under the comet's gaze, the answer may never be clear. What is clear, though, is that you were part of something far bigger than yourself, part of a story that will live on long after the comet is gone, long after the battles are won, and long after the gods' favor is questioned. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Tonight we're diving into the sky, but not for stargazing like you might be used to, no. We're talking about how the samurai, those disciplined warriors of ancient Japan, studied the stars before heading into battle. Yeah, you heard me right. They looked up at the night sky, and rather than just admiring the twinkling lights, they saw strategy, guidance, and a cosmic connection that could make or break a fight. You probably won't survive this if you aren't ready to have your mind blown about how the heavens influence life or death decisions on the battlefield. Picture this. The battlefield is set, the air is thick with tension, and warriors are preparing for what could be the defining fight of their lives. It's pitch black, the stars are out, And for the samurai, this was no mere backdrop to the fight. The night sky was an intricate map, one that could lead them to victory or guide them into a deadly trap. But why did they look to the heavens like this? Was it just superstition, or did the stars hold some deeper wisdom? You see, to the samurai, the cosmos wasn't just a random scattering of lights, it was a divine blueprint. They believed that the heavens were the realm of the gods, and that every star, every constellation, could influence fate. And in a culture where honor, precision, and destiny were everything, the sky became more than just a spiritual compass. It was a battlefield ally. To the samurai, the position of the stars could be the deciding factor between a glorious victory or a catastrophic defeat. Historians still argue whether the samurai truly believed in this cosmic guidance, or if it was more of a ritualistic practice to ensure mental clarity and unity before battle. Some say it was superstition, but others believe it had practical applications. And if you're thinking about that one time you consulted the stars for your horoscope, you're not totally off the mark. However, it wasn't about predicting if you'd meet your soulmate. It was about navigating destiny, literally and figuratively, on the battlefield. It wasn't just about gazing at the stars for moral support, though. No, the samurai used their understanding of the heavens to time battles, to predict natural events like weather shifts, and even to choose the right moment to strike. The stars weren't random. They were signs, guides, and warnings all rolled into one. As their influence grew, so did the depth of their observations. Samurai, particularly the more elite and spiritually inclined, began to create sophisticated star charts. These weren't just maps. They were battle plans written in the stars. The constellations held tactical secrets, and the samurai would plot their movements, formations, and strategies based on them. Imagine having your very own celestial GPS, but instead of guiding you through traffic, it's leading you to the front lines of a life or death struggle. But this wasn't just a tradition of the samurai elite. It trickled down to every level of their society. Even the less experienced or lower-ranked warriors had a basic understanding of the celestial bodies and their importance. Why? Because the night sky could hold answers to questions that military strategies alone couldn't answer. The stars were seen as the voice of the gods, after all. Who better to turn to in a crisis? Now let's take a moment to look at the bigger picture here. You're probably thinking this sounds a little too mystical, right? Well, that's the thing about samurai culture. It wasn't just about the sword and the shield. It was about connecting with a higher order of things. This belief that the stars held knowledge wasn't just about winning battles. It was about aligning themselves with a cosmic force that extended beyond their own understanding. It was about trying to feel in sync with the universe, finding purpose in the chaos. Historians still debate whether these celestial strategies were simply part of the samurai's rituals or whether they had a real, tangible impact on their military success. There's no denying, though, that this connection to the sky created a unique and fascinating intersection of spirituality and warfare. The stars weren't just pretty lights. They were a crucial part of their survival strategy. The question is, how far did this belief in the heavens go? Was it really their best-kept secret weapon? You've now got a taste of how the samurai saw the stars, but it doesn't end there. The real question is, how did they actually use these celestial bodies to gain an advantage on the battlefield? We're about to dig deeper into how the night sky became a powerful tactical tool, one that shaped the very course of their military strategies. The constellations weren't just for inspiration or mysticism. They were calculated guides used to predict the perfect time to strike, determine ideal terrain, and, get this, evaluate the battle's atmosphere, all with the flick of a few stars in the sky. Imagine you're a samurai standing on the edge of your camp, gazing up at the sky just before dawn. You look for the stars that mark the constellations of the zodiac, each of which has its own symbolism and meaning. Some warriors believed that the stars' alignment could signal the perfect moment to attack, almost like the universe was giving them the green light. Others might consult these patterns to understand the mood of the gods. If the constellations were aligned, it was a sign that the gods favored them and that the battle would go well. If not, well, you might want to reconsider charging into battle at that exact moment. The positioning of stars could also indicate more practical matters, like the time of year or the condition of the weather. In ancient Japan, knowing when to fight based on the seasons was crucial. Fighting in the middle of a rainy season could mean slippery terrain and poor visibility, so selecting the right timing and location was key. Samurai strategists were masters of using the stars as part of this cosmic calendar to identify the optimal moments for battle. Historians still argue over whether samurai relied solely on the stars for battle timing or if they used a more holistic approach, factoring in weather patterns, local knowledge, and other signs. Still, there's a strong belief that the samurai didn't just use the stars as a decorative feature in their strategy. They actively charted and planned their campaigns using these celestial pointers. It wasn't enough to be a good swordsman. To be a truly effective samurai, you had to be in tune with the rhythms of the cosmos. And let's not forget that the stars could also reveal more than just timing. They could indicate the best terrain for battle. In ancient Japan, geography could play as much of a role in a battle's outcome as individual skill. Samurai would study the stars to determine where the heavens pointed them, and often this would mean finding places that were strategically sound. Certain constellations marked areas known for their natural defensive advantages, like high ground or areas near rivers. One particularly interesting example comes from the famous Battle of Kurakara in 1183, where the samurai general Minamoto no Yoshinaka reportedly used the stars to help pick the ideal location to confront his enemies. The general was known to be not just a skilled fighter, but a celestial strategist. He used the positioning of the stars and the moon to gauge the best time to launch his attack, and it worked. Under the stars' guidance, the Minamoto forces won the battle, securing their place in history. It might sound a little too mystical for some, but these calculations weren't based on whimsy. The samurai had a deep understanding of astronomy, passed down through generations of warrior monks, scholars, and stargazers. To them, the stars weren't just pretty lights. They were guides to the natural world, the best conditions for war, and the signs of favor from the gods. Their celestial maps and timing could often mean the difference between total success and catastrophic failure. Historians still debate how much of this reliance on the stars was based on pure belief versus practical military knowledge. Some suggest that it was a mix of both, spiritual guidance combined with a well-grounded understanding of astronomy. There's no clear answer, but the legacy of this star-based strategy is undeniable. The samurai didn't just believe in the stars, they acted on them. The effectiveness of these star-based tactics wasn't just limited to one-off events or superstitions either. Samurai warriors of all levels had a deep understanding of the constellations and the role they played in their warfare. From the moment they trained, they were taught to read the stars, much like they were taught the way of the sword. Imagine trying to prepare for battle. Wouldn't it be comforting to know that, no matter how things went, the heavens were on your side? And here's the kicker. This wasn't just about the night sky. The samurai were fully aware of the subtle shifts in the stars' positions throughout the year, and they used these changes to influence their strategies. As the seasons changed and constellations shifted, so too did their approach to battle. They would factor in these changes when making major decisions, whether that meant timing a retreat or anticipating an enemy's next move. The stars were never static for them. They were constantly evolving, just like the samurai's battlefield strategy. So next time you think about the stars, picture them not as far-off lights in the sky, but as powerful forces guiding the samurai's decisions, their victories, and their legacy. With every glance upward, they were shaping the world around them in ways we can still appreciate today. By now, you're probably wondering, if the samurai were so in tune with the stars, did they use the moon in the same way? Spoiler alert, they absolutely did. The moon wasn't just a pretty face in the night sky, it was a key player in the samurai's arsenal of celestial tactics. In fact, the phases of the moon held an enormous amount of power in the samurai's decision-making process. From guiding when to march into battle to influencing the timing of ambushes, the moon was seen as a clock for both the cosmos and the warriors below. Imagine this. It's a crisp night, and you're a samurai preparing to strike. The moon is hanging high above you, and you're looking up, weighing the phase of the moon to decide if tonight's the night for action. It sounds a little mystical, right? But this wasn't some whimsical superstition. It was deeply rooted in strategy. Samurai understood the phases of the moon intimately, and they used them to time their attacks and movements. The moon in particular was vital for understanding the ebb and flow of night. Some phases signaled the best times to fight, while others were seen as best left for retreat or rest. A full moon, for instance, could be both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, its bright light provided clarity, allowing armies to march or prepare without being cloaked in darkness. On the other, it also meant that any movement could be seen by the enemy, leaving them vulnerable to counterattacks. In other words, a full moon could expose weaknesses, or it could illuminate the path to victory. Historians still argue about how widespread this belief was across all samurai ranks. Was the moon just a tactical tool for high-ranking strategists, or did every warrior have this cosmic clock in mind as they made decisions? What we do know is that, much like the stars, the moon was a crucial piece of the puzzle in the samurai's strategy. The light and darkness it provided had meaning beyond just the aesthetic. It was about the psychology of battle. Was the moon full? Was it waning? Was it a new moon, offering total darkness, a perfect cover for a surprise attack? Every phase had its purpose, but the moon wasn't just about the literal light it provided. It also had a symbolic place in samurai culture. The waxing and waning of the moon mirrored the ebb and flow of battle itself. It was a constant reminder that nothing, not even victory, lasts forever. The moon's phases symbolized the inevitable rise and fall of power, the cycles of life, and the balance between light and dark. For the samurai, it was a reminder that, just like the moon, their fortunes could change at any moment. One minute, they could be shining brightly, and the next, they could be fading into darkness. Beyond the tactical and symbolic aspects, the moon also served as an indicator of the god's will. Some samurai believed that the position of the moon in the sky could signal divine favor or disfavor. A moon in a specific position could be interpreted as an omen, either one of good fortune or one of impending doom. This made the moon a spiritual guide as well as a practical one. Samurai warriors would often seek guidance from their spiritual leaders or astrologers to interpret the moon's movements, seeking signs of approval or warning before engaging in battle. One particularly interesting tradition among some samurai involved consulting a sacred text known as the Kyujo, a kind of celestial calendar that mapped out the phases of the moon in relation to the most auspicious times for combat. The text also contained predictions on how the moon's cycle might influence the outcome of battles. Warriors would often base their battle schedules around these readings, believing that fighting during the right phase of the moon would bring them success. This integration of lunar cycles into samurai warfare wasn't just about practicality. It was about fostering a deep connection with nature. By aligning themselves with the natural rhythms of the universe, samurai sought to align their personal fate with the cosmic forces at play. It was as if they believed they were part of a greater cosmic battle, one that transcended the physical world. Historians still debate the extent to which samurai relied on astrology and celestial calendars in warfare. Some argue that their focus on the moon was purely tactical, just another tool to use in their pursuit of victory. Others, however, suggest that it was more spiritual, with the moon offering a connection to the divine that guided them through battle. While it's hard to say definitively which of these perspectives is correct, what's clear is that the moon played an integral role in the samurai's strategic thinking. And whether they were using it as a divine guide or a tactical advantage, it shaped the way they approached conflict. The moon's influence wasn't just about timing either. Some samurai also believed that certain phases of the moon could enhance their own abilities or those of their enemies. A full moon, for example, was often seen as a time of heightened energy and strength, making it an ideal time for a major offensive. Conversely, the new moon, with its darkness, could be used for surprise attacks or stealth movements under the cover of night. The samurai understood that the moon didn't just shine, it influenced the energy of the world around them. So next time you look up at the moon, remember that it's not just a glowing orb in the sky. It's a celestial partner, one that has shaped the lives of warriors throughout history. The samurai didn't just look at it for inspiration. They looked at it for answers, for guidance, and for strategy. The phases of the moon weren't just phases. They were battle plans written in the sky, influencing the course of history one moonbeam at a time. All right, we've covered the stars and the moon, but now we need to talk about something a little more out there: astrology. Now, before you start imagining samurai pulling tarot cards or casting runes, let's clarify. The samurai had a deep, well-developed belief system that fused astrology with practical decision-making, especially when it came to warfare. It wasn't just about reading the stars to gauge the weather. It was about using astrological signs to predict the fate of a battle, the compatibility of different generals, and even the alignment of forces in battle. Astrology at its core was woven into every part of samurai life, shaping their decisions, guiding their interactions, and determining everything from the timing of attacks to the very relationships between warriors. If you've ever checked your horoscope to decide whether to take on a new project or get into a heated debate, you're not totally off the mark. The samurai took this concept to an entirely new level, using it to inform life and death decisions. Let's start with the basics. The samurai would rely heavily on the Chinese zodiac, which was an important influence on their astrology. There were 12 animals, each representing a different year in a cycle, and each year was tied to specific characteristics, fortunes, and energies. If you were born in the year of the rat, for example, you'd carry the traits of the rat: cunning, resourceful, and possibly a bit mischievous. A warrior born in this year might be thought to excel in stealth and surprise attacks. While it sounds like something out of an anime, it was taken very seriously in samurai circles, with entire military campaigns being influenced by these beliefs. Historians still debate the extent to which astrology influenced military decisions among the samurai. Some suggest that it was mostly for personal guidance or ceremonial purposes, while others argue that it had a direct impact on how battles were scheduled or how commanders interacted with their subordinates. What's certain is that astrology played a significant role in shaping the samurai worldview, and even the most pragmatic generals would often consult astrological charts to ensure that their battles took place under the most favorable signs. Astrology was also a tool for evaluating alliances. Think about this. You're a samurai commander, and you need to form an alliance with another warlord. How do you know if the partnership will be successful? The answer, of course, is to check the stars. Astrologers would carefully examine the birth charts of potential allies to predict the compatibility of the two parties. If the stars didn't align, you might hesitate to trust them in battle, no matter how strong their forces were. This practice wasn't just a random superstition. It was grounded in the belief that cosmic forces influence personal dynamics. The stars didn't just guide battle strategies, they also guided relationships, from personal to political. And here's where it gets interesting. Astrology wasn't just a practice of generals or spiritual leaders. Some samurai even had personal astrologers, trusted advisors who would provide regular readings to guide everything from when to eat to when to strike. These astrologers weren't just reading the day's horoscope. They were interpreting celestial events like solar eclipses or planetary movements to understand how they might affect the samurai's fate. The influence of these astrologers was so strong that some samurai commanders would delay or even cancel battles based on the astrologer's advice. Imagine a battle delayed because a general thought the stars were off. It might seem crazy today, but for the samurai, it was just another part of their strategy. But astrology wasn't just about making predictions. It was about understanding the energies of the universe and using those energies to your advantage. The samurai believed that by aligning themselves with favorable celestial forces, they could gain the upper hand in battle. The right cosmic conditions could make a difference between victory and defeat, so it wasn't enough to be skilled with a katana. You had to be in tune with the universe's rhythms. The samurai were masters at blending the physical and metaphysical to create a harmonious strategy. Even the famous battle strategies that we associate with samurai, like surprise ambushes or swift, lightning-fast raids, were often planned based on astrological readings. The general would look at the stars, decide the best day to launch the attack, and move under cover of darkness, or light, depending on which celestial bodies were in play. Sometimes they would plan an ambush during an eclipse, knowing that the enemy's vision would be obscured by both the moon and the sudden, unnatural darkness. Other times they would time their charge to coincide with a specific planetary alignment, believing that it would maximize their strength and luck. In some ways, astrology gave the samurai an edge over their enemies who didn't consult the stars. While most other warriors might prepare for battle based on terrain and tactics alone, the samurai had a deeper understanding of the unseen forces at play. They weren't just planning a battle, they were aligning themselves with cosmic energies, positioning themselves to take advantage of the universe's natural rhythms. But it wasn't always a smooth ride. There were times when astrology led samurai astray, just like any other belief system or strategy. There's a famous tale of a general who, after consulting an astrologer, delayed a battle for an entire month based on the belief that the stars weren't aligned properly. The enemy, in the meantime, moved ahead with their own plans and launched a surprise attack. Historians still debate whether this was a poor tactical decision or if it was just a sign that sometimes, even the most carefully crafted strategies can go awry. The blending of astrology and strategy among the samurai was complex, and it left a lasting legacy on how warfare was approached in Japan. The idea that the stars could influence your fate, your fortune, and even your relationships with others is still felt in Japanese culture today. While astrology may not be as central to modern warfare, the samurai's belief that the cosmos could influence the outcome of a battle lives on in the cultural consciousness. So next time you hear someone talk about their zodiac sign, just imagine how it would have been to have that same belief shape your entire approach to war. The stars weren't just distant objects to the samurai. They were living, breathing forces that could tip the scales of destiny. So far, we've explored the stars, the moon, and the guiding hand of astrology in the samurai strategy. But the real question is, what did this all mean in the long run? What kind of legacy did these celestial strategies leave behind? The samurai's unique relationship with the heavens didn't just shape their own battles. It had a ripple effect on future military strategies and even seeped into Japanese culture in subtle but lasting ways. While the samurai era is centuries behind us, the legacy of their star-guided warfare can still be seen today, both in military tactics and in the cultural echoes of their celestial beliefs. Let's rewind a bit. Picture a battlefield, quiet for a moment as both sides prepare. The moonlight is steady, the stars are in place, and there's an air of anticipation. The samurai in their finely tuned armor stand poised to make their move, every action considered and calculated, not just based on terrain or combat tactics, but on an invisible framework of cosmic guidance. The enemy, unaware of this, simply sees a battlefield. But the samurai, they see the stars and the moon aligning their fate. This wasn't just mystical thinking. It was a strategy of using every possible advantage, even those that couldn't be physically touched. The alignment of the stars wasn't just poetic, it was a weapon in itself. And as these methods of using celestial wisdom passed down through generations of samurai, they became deeply integrated into the cultural fabric of Japan. Military leaders in later periods would sometimes look to the heavens for guidance, using celestial patterns to plan not just warfare, but diplomacy, trade, and alliances. In many ways, the samurai set the foundation for a worldview where the natural world, bodies of water, wind, the stars, could all play roles in shaping outcomes. In the centuries after the samurai era, many of the martial traditions they developed were absorbed into other parts of Japanese culture. While the direct use of astrology and celestial guidance in battle may have faded, the philosophical understanding that there is a higher order, a cosmic design, has persisted. This is where we start to see the deeper cultural impact, the belief that everything, from the smallest grain of rice to the stars above, is connected. This worldview permeates aspects of Japanese life even today, from the aesthetics of Zen gardens to the precision of tea ceremonies. It's a quiet but ever-present reminder that just as the samurai look to the sky, there's always a larger picture at play. Historians still argue whether the samurai's celestial guidance was a truly effective strategy or more of a symbolic practice to bolster morale. But whatever the case, the fact that such practices became so integral to their culture and survival suggests that it gave them a psychological edge. Think about it. If your army is standing there, gazing up at the stars, believing that they have the universe's favor, it's bound to affect their confidence. This celestial belief system created a kind of unity, a sense that they weren't just fighting for glory, but for something greater than themselves. It wasn't just military victories that carried on the samurai's celestial wisdom. It was their broader cultural influence. Even the practices of seafaring merchants and traders in Japan, who also consulted the stars, can be traced back to the samurai's way of looking at the cosmos. The legacy of this skyward gaze is embedded in the rhythms of Japanese culture, from poetry to art to architecture. You'll see references to the moon, the stars, and the constellations in countless works of literature and art. Those influences were deeply tied to the warrior class, the samurai, who believed that these celestial elements could reveal the secrets of the universe. But what about the modern day? You might not find a general today glancing at the stars before a battle, or an astrologer determining the best day for a surprise attack. However, the influence of that samurai approach to cosmic strategy is still felt in the art of military planning. Modern leaders, while not using astrology or star charts, do rely on patterns, whether weather patterns, historical data, or psychological cues, to determine the best times to strike. This kind of predictive thinking, once tied to celestial alignments, now feeds into more pragmatic forms of strategy. It's not just military strategy where we see the samurai's celestial legacy, though. Their relationship with the heavens has influenced Japan's artistic and spiritual heritage in profound ways. The stars and moon continue to be recurring themes in Japanese poetry, particularly haiku, where nature's cycles are often used as metaphors for the cycles of life. The samurai's reverence for celestial bodies translated into a deep appreciation for natural beauty, a quiet, reflective quality that can still be seen in everything, from the architecture of Japanese gardens to the seasonal rituals that mark the changing of the year. The celestial awareness cultivated by the samurai was also deeply intertwined with their spiritual practices. The samurai adhered to various belief systems, such as Shintoism and Buddhism, both of which emphasize the importance of living in harmony with nature and understanding one's place within the larger cosmos. This connection to the universe was part of their code, not just on the battlefield, but in everyday life. Even today, many Japanese people continue to follow lunar calendars, and the moon remains a significant symbol in cultural and religious practices. So the next time you look up at the stars or the moon, consider how they might have once shaped the fate of warriors, and how that cosmic guidance is still part of the cultural consciousness. The samurai's belief in the stars wasn't just about mystical predictions or superstitions. It was a way of aligning themselves with something larger than life. And even now, their legacy reminds us that the universe, no matter how far away, is still a part of our story. End of script. Sweet dreams.